Here are the top stories for today, June 30, 2022.
Ako, si Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. ay taimtim na nanunumpa. Natutuparin ko na buong katapatan at sigasig ang aking mga tungkulin bilang Pangulo ng Pilipinas.
A new chapter in the country's history begins. Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. is sworn into office as the 17th Philippine President, embarking on an array of solutions to concerns and calling on Filipinos to stay united. What do Pinoys expect from the new administration? We'll listen to their thoughts on what they believe are pressing matters that needs immediate attention from the new government. Some local government units see both all-timers and newcomers, as elected officials also take their oath of office. And paying more fares. The Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board approves the 2 pesos hike in minimum fare of jeepneys starting July 1st.
Si Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr.
Si Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr.
ay mataimtim na nanunumpa
Sa pangarap na maging mapayapa ang ating bansa, ang pangarap nyo ay pangarap ko. Sa pangarap na maging maunlad ang ating bansa, ang pangarap nyo ay pangarap ko.
It's the dawn of a new era in the country's history. Garnering over 31 million votes in the May 9 polls, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. takes over as the Philippines' 17th president. He starts his leadership journey banking on the promise of uniting Filipinos in order to bravely address pressing issues and challenges faced by the country. Marita Muahe brings us the highlights from today's inauguration rites.
Ako, si Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr.
Si Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr.
ay mataimtim na nanunumpa. Natutuparin ko ng buong katapatan at sigasig
Natutuparin ko na buong katapatan at sigasig
ang aking mga tungkulin bilang Pangulo ng Pilipinas.
At the tick of noon on Thursday, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. officially took his oath as the 17th President of the Republic of the Philippines at the National Museum of Fine Arts in Manila, with the promise of a better tomorrow for Filipinos through a wide array of platforms and call for citizens to stand united. He was accompanied by his wife, Luis Araneta Marcos, and their 3 sons, Sandro, Simon, and Vincent.
Sa pangarap na maging mapayapa ang ating bansa, ang pangarap nyo ay pangarap ko. Sa pangarap na maging maunlad ang ating bansa, ang pangarap nyo ay pangarap ko.
The only son and namesake of the late former President Ferdinand Marcos, he laid out his plans for the country in his inaugural speech, which opened his speech by thanking the Filipino people who resoundingly voted for him to lead the country for the next 6 years.
I was not the instrument of change. You were that. You made it happen. But I am ready for the task. I will get it done.
He also vowed to give preferential treatment and a serious policy thought on the country's food sufficiency.
Food sufficiency must get the preferential treatment the richest free trade countries always gave their agricultural sectors. I am giving that policy the most serious thought. There will be changes starting tomorrow.
Aside from food security and agriculture, Marcos Jr. also talked about trade policies, economic transformation, and transparency in the health sector, including improving the country's COVID response. He also praised the infrastructure projects taken on by former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, as he assured to complete the projects that have been started, adding that no part of the country will be neglected. Prior to the inauguration rites, Marcos and Duterte met in Malacanang, where the outgoing chief executive was given departure honors. Duterte skipped the rites and left for his hometown in Davao City via a commercial flight. For the PNA Newsroom, I am Marita Muahe.
Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. is coming to Malacanang not only as the son of a president, but as the country's 17th chief executive. He also holds on to his wealth of experience and his drive to unite all Filipinos to prove himself worthy of his new role. Long before embarking on his new path to become president, Marcos served as vice governor of Ilocos Norte from 1980 to 1983 when he was 23 years old. He replaced his aunt as governor in 1983 and stayed in power until 1986. After his family's return from exile in 1992, Bongbong served as congressman in the 2nd District of Ilocos Norte. Among the landmark measures he authored led to the establishment of the Department of Energy and the National Youth Commission. As governor of Ilocos Norte from 1998 to 2007, Bongbong transformed the Ilocos Norte into a first-class province and a pioneer in wind power technology. He returned to the House of Representatives in 2007 and then won a seat as a senator in 2010. In the Senate, Bongbong chaired the Senate Committee on Local Government and the Committee on Public Works. Now as president, Marcos is taking over the helm of the Agriculture Department, which is now fighting against the looming food crisis, curbing smuggling, and addressing concerns in the workers in the sector. Throughout his campaign, he sought to promote unity among Filipinos, urging everyone to work together in a time of crisis.
By your vote, you rejected the politics of division. I offended none of my rivals in this campaign. I listened instead to what they were saying, and I saw little incompatibility with my own ideas. I believe that if we but focus on the work at hand and the work that will come to hand, we will go very far under my watch. You believe that too. At pinakinggan ko ang tinig ninyo na ang sinisigaw ay pagkakaisa, pagkakaisa, pagkakaisa.
Newly elected President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. made a clear message to his international allies and partners, saying strong partnership will surely lead to the transformation of the world economy and post-pandemic recovery. Immediately after his inauguration, Marcos thanked the diplomatic community for their warm congratulatory messages. He assured his international audience his administration will continue to foster stronger ties. Marcos gave his message in the National Museum where the inauguration took place. Before this, controversial actress and host Tony Gonzaga led us singing the Philippine national anthem. Marcos was then welcomed with a warm civic military parade, flyby military assets, and a Von d'honneur. Former President Rodrigo Duterte meanwhile skipped the event as he returned home to Davao City. However, the survey's most popular president urged Filipinos to cooperate with the new leader.
As give all our support to the new administration. Tulungan natin sila. Tulungan natin sila.
The new president of the Philippines, Bongbong Marcos Jr. takes the helm of the country, recovering from COVID-19 pandemic and its effects on the world. Let's learn about what's in store for Marcos as the highest official of the land from this report. Securing the highest executive seat in the Philippines is far from sweet and fun, especially in the post-pandemic setup. This is undeniably a challenging role for the new Chief Executive Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. Marcos will solely head the executive branch of the government. This means he's got a call to choose secretaries, undersecretaries, and other heads of the government, department, agencies, commissions, and even the military and police. As the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Marcos may declare martial law in case of invasion or rebellion when public safety requires it. However, it is only for 60 days unless granted an extension by the Congress. Besides this, Marcos has the power to appoint members of the judiciary, including justices of the Supreme Court and trial court judges. He can also veto bills that have been approved by the Senate and the House of Representatives. These roles are not to be seen as leverage, considering the challenges awaiting Marcos. And the classic great power comes with great responsibility is no less than true for him. With an outstanding debt of 12.09 trillion pesos by end February, the economic team of the newly elected President Marcos needs to be strategically sensitive to the priorities of the land. Prices of basic commodities are on a hike alongside the crude price increases. Some farmers are grieving for the tripled fertilizer prices caused by the ongoing Russia and Ukraine conflict. Global food shortage also looms, and other exporting countries are gradually halting their provision to secure their own. This demands a strategic balance for international alliance safe enough to maintain friendship and stay far from conflict the country cannot afford. With the survey's most popular President Rodrigo Duterte leaving, with all his legacy, Marcos now stands before the vigilant watch of the Filipinos whom he will serve. Newly elected President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. has high expectations to fulfill during his first 100 days in office, according to a survey by Publicis Asia. In a 2022 Pahayag second quarter survey, 68% of respondents said they expect Marcos Jr. to perform well or very well during his first 100 days as president. At least 14% expects him to perform poorly or very poorly. 11% said they expect the president to perform neither poorly nor well, while 7% were unsure. The respondents also rank economy, jobs, and education as top 3 issues that Marcos should focus on. President-elect Bongbong Marcos Jr. took his oath today at the National Museum of the Philippines in Manila. He now shares a history with the landmark where his father, alongside the previous leaders and lawmakers of the country, once walked its halls. William Theo tells us more about the National Museum.
On this day, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. takes his oath as the 17th President of the Philippines before the hallowed grounds of the National Museum. Marcos originally chose the Quirino Grandstand for his inauguration venue, as his father, former President Ferdinand Sr., took his oath there as well. But its proximity to the Manila COVID-19 Field Hospital led the Presidential Inauguration Committee to choose otherwise. The particular building where Marcos took his oath is called the National Museum of Fine Arts. The museum building was built in 1921 and served to house the government's various legislative bodies throughout history. It was first known as the Old Legislative Building when it housed the Philippine legislature in 1926. Later on, it was called the Old Congress Building when it became the home of the Bicameral Congress from 1926 to 1972 and the Senate from 1987 to 1997. Marcos Sr. stepped in these halls as congressman from 1949 to 1959 and then again as senator from 1959 to 1965. Meanwhile, Bongbong Marcos is the 4th president to take his oath at the National Museum. Manuel L. Quezon took his oath as President of the Commonwealth in 1935. Jose P. Laurel was also inaugurated here in 1943, followed by Manuel Rojas in 1946. The Museum of Fine Arts is part of the National Anthropology, the National Museum of Natural History, and the National Planetarium. On September 30, 2010, the National Historical Commission of the Philippines declared the museum as a National Historical Landmark. The National Museum of Fine Arts is home to 29 galleries and hallway exhibitions. Among its treasured collections are the Spoliarium by Juan Luna, the Assassination of Governor Bustamante by Felix Resurreccion Hidalgo, works by national artists Fernando Amorsolo and Carlos Botong Francisco, and other creations by contemporary artists. It is a popular tourist attraction at the heart of Manila, alongside its neighboring museums, as well as landmarks like the Rizal Park, the Metropolitan Theater, and of course, Intramuros. The COVID-19 pandemic temporarily shut down the National Museum alongside other public places until it was reopened on October 19, 2021. Today, the National Museum not only rebuilds its reputation as a tourist spot and cultural icon, but it also reclaims its place in history as a site for inaugurating future leaders of the country. For the PNA Newsroom, I am William Theo.
Still ahead, Filipinos greet the new president with a bang. We hear their thoughts and wishes for the new leadership. And the plea of transport groups for a fare hike in jeepneys get a nod. We tell you how much later. We'll be back after a quick break. Keep it here on the PNA Newsroom.
Alamin kung paano ang tamang pagsusuot ng surgical mask. Una, hawakan ang mask sa strap at siguruhing natatakpan nito ang inyong bibig at ilong. Tandaan, ang may kulay na bahagi ng mask ang dapat nasa labas. Ito lamang ang tamang paraan ng pagsuot nito. Ihulma ang nose piece o maliit na metallic strip ayon sa hugis ng inyong ilong. Iwasan ang paghawak sa inyong ilong at bibig. Kung marumi na ang mask, hubarin ito gamit ang strap at itapon ito sa isang basurahan. Siguruhin ang maayos na paghuhugas ng kamay gamit ang sabon at tubig. Ang surgical mask ay dapat gamitin ng mga pasyenteng may sakit sa baga o mga taong mayroong ubo, sipon at lagnat, mga nag-aalaga sa mga may sakit, at mga healthcare at frontline workers. Maaari ring magsuot nito kung kayo ay pupunta sa matataong lugar. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin ang tamang paraan ng pag-ubo upang mapigilan ang paglaganap ng Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ugaliing magdala ng panyo o tissue. Kung uubo o babahing, takpan ang buong ilong at bibig gamit ang panyo o tissue. Kung walang dalang panyo o tissue, maaaring gamitin ang braso na pantakip. Kung nakararamdam na kailangan umubo o bumahing, agad na dumistansya sa mga tao sa paligid. Huwag dumura kung saan-saan, gumamit ng tissue at itapon sa basurahan. Ugaliin ang paghuhugas ng kamay at paggamit ng alcohol o hand sanitizer upang mamatay ang mikrobyo. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Filipinos welcome with concern the inauguration of President Bongbong Marcos Jr. amid various issues burdening the country. They hope the new Marcos administration would address these issues and uplift the common people's welfare. Here's my report. This day marks yet another historic event in the assumption of seat with the highest power vested by the great majority of Filipinos. With all the inevitable challenges brought by internal and external factors, the public have voiced their hopes for President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. For 40-year-old Grab driver Lito Tuanzon, the worsening crude hikes are cutting his legs out as he strives to provide for his family. He's bringing home an average income of 600 pesos a day for a family of 5.
Sa bagong upong presidente natin, sana maaksyonan kaagad yung sa gas subsidy. Para sa amin, mga rider, delivery. Nung pandemic naman, kami naman nagsakripisyo sana. Unahin sana.
For a young security guard, a wage hike should be granted under Marcos's term.
Sa amin naman, sana yung sahod namin sa 5.9, tumaas lang konti. Hindi talaga kasya kasi konti lang po ang 5 anak. Tapos konti lang talaga. Mahirap talaga. Kaya lalaki pa kunti, mga 700 lang ang sana.
A street vendor who's also a long-term supporter of the Marcos family has his wish.
Tulungan kami ng mga vendors na huwag namang paalisin sa mga ganito kasi siyempre ito lang ang hanap buhay namin. Tapos darating pa yung mga MMD, kukunin niya mga ganyan. Tulungan.
Likewise, a single mom of 2, Reynalda Orata has her share of hopes that she wants the new executive to hear.
Sana matupad po yung sinasabi niya na ibababa po lahat ng mga presyo po. Kasi bilang nanay, nagbabudget po, kulang po yung mga budget namin dahil manicurista lang po ako, mahirap mag-budget.
However, she expressed her concern about the proposed mandatory ROTC which might be experienced by her children.
Sana hindi naman mangyari yun para sa mga mahihirap po, mahirap din po yung gawin.
But communications and journalism students have their views on the matter.
Pabor po ako kasi po sa kalagayan ng bansa natin ngayon hindi masyadong nabibigyan ng tuon yung military forces. Kumbaga kung magkakaroon ng kaalaman yung bawat kabataan tungkol sa ROTC, magkakaroon tayo ng mas malakas na paninindigan para sa ating bansa. Ayun po. Saka sa experience ko din po, maganda din po katulad ng sa South Korea, sa China, meron po silang ROTC, di ba po, na mandatory.
Kasi di ba sa mandatory ROTC, you only have to obey and obey and obey. Yun lang naman yung inaayawan ng mga estudyante doon eh. Pero siguro kung malinis naman yung pagkaka-execute, wala nang lapses like harassments and other abuses, okay naman siya. Kung ang pag-uusapan ay national security, kung i-compare natin sa ibang bansa wherein they're always ready for example, nagkaroon ng war-like na problems internationally, we will be ready.
For Indigenous tribe member and college student Bimiana Capuno, it's high time for Marcos to address environmental problems and ensure youth involvement.
Pagtuunan ng pansin yung mga kabataan na isali sa mga trainings, seminar, upang mapangalagaan ang ating kalikasan dahil ito'y unti-unti nang nasisira. At ayaw naman natin na pagdating ng panahon ay hindi na maaabutan ito ng mga henerasyon pa sa atin.
These are just some of the commoners' wish lists in the new administration upfronted by challenging responsibility. But undeniably, it's unabated, increasing prices of commodities that are taking a toll on the pockets of many Filipinos. Several newly elected local officials took their oaths of office on the same day as President Marcos Jr. inauguration. In Negros Oriental, Governor-elect Pride Henry Teves was sworn in before Executive Judge Gerardo Paguio Jr. at the Hall of Justice in Dumaguete City. Teves assumes office amid reports Governor Ruel de Gamo will not allegedly relinquish his post. In Pasig City, Representative Roman Romulo took his oath as congressman before RTC Executive Judge Danilo Cruz. In a short message, Romulo called for unity among all Pasigueños to ensure the city's continued progress. Meanwhile, Taguig Mayor-elect Lani Cayetano had her inauguration ceremony today at the Center Renato Cayetano Memorial High School. Her oath of office was administered by her husband, Senator Alan Peter Cayetano. Other elected officials of Taguig also took their oaths alongside her. In Basilan, outgoing Lamitan City Mayor Rose Furigay administered the oath of office of her husband and incoming Mayor Roderick Furigay at the city's gymnasium. Incoming Mayor Roderick happens to be the outgoing Vice Mayor. Vico Soto also took his oath as the mayor of Pasig City today at the Inares Sports Complex. He was sworn into office by the Pasig City Regional Trial Court Executive Judge Danilo Cruz. Connie Reyes, his mother, held the Bible during the inauguration while his father, Vic Soto, joined him on stage. Among the grateful hearts for the 6-year service of former President Duterte were members of the Partido Demokratiko Pilipino Lakas ng Bayan or PDP Laban. The party acknowledged how Duterte's leadership was able to make the country withstand COVID-19 pandemic threats and its economic effects. The PDP Laban also lauded Duterte's firm stand to pursue the Build, Build, Build program, war against crime and illegal drugs, and the tranquility in Mindanao, among others. The group earlier expressed full support and solidarity to the administration of President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and Vice President Sara Duterte Carpio. In March, the PDP Laban faction of Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi endorsed Marcos' presidential bid. There's neither suppression of the press freedom nor abridging of the freedom of speech as the Security and Exchange Commissions uphold the shutdown of Rappler Incorporated and Rappler Holdings Corporation. Senate Committee on Public Information and Mass Media Chairperson Ramon Revilla Jr. made this statement amid criticism on the SEC's move. Revilla said the SEC has valid legal grounds to make the move to ensure the welfare of the Filipinos. He clarified that it was the violation of Rappler as a corporate entity that caused the SEC's action and not merely its role as part of the press. Earlier, the SEC ruled the Rappler had violated the foreign equity restrictions in mass media provided for in the Philippine Constitution. Rappler CEO Maria Ressa, meanwhile, assured they are willing to appeal the decision even up until the highest court of the land. A fare hike in jeepneys will welcome commuters starting tomorrow. This after the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board or LTFRB granted the petition of transport groups to increase the minimum fare in jeepneys to 11 pesos beginning July 1st. The order came days after the minimum fare was hiked from 9 pesos. The new minimum fare is applicable during the first 4 kilometers with no increase in succeeding kilometers. However, motor PUJs across all regions are authorized to increase their minimum fare to 13 pesos for the first 4 kilometers. The order is subject to certain rules such as grant of discount to senior citizens, persons with disabilities, and students. All PUJ operators are required to display a fare hike notice in their vehicles. More stories from the newsroom. The Presidential Communications Operations Office is now under a new leadership, and commuters of the MRT-3 are nothing but grateful for the rail line's free rides. Details ahead, stay with the PNA Newsroom.
Sa matinding laban natin sa Coronavirus Disease 2019, sugpuin din natin ang pagkalat ng fake news. Huwag magbahagi ng impormasyon na hindi tiyak ang pinagmulan. I-check mabuti ang source ng balita. Kumuha lamang ng impormasyon mula sa mga official channel ng Department of Health. Huwag magpadala sa maling balita, basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Continuing efforts to further upgrade government media assets and facilities, realization of the Government Communications Academy, and intensified international media linkages. These are just some of the hopes of the former Communications Secretary for the next administration. Former Communications Secretary Martin Andanar made this clear as he personally welcomed Trixie Cruz Angeles as the new head of the Presidential Communications Operations Office. Andanar said he's very confident that Angeles will be able to pursue these game-changing reforms in the state media. For Angeles, the PCOO has to be presented with more depth and dimension, saying the government media must be able to strategically adapt to empowering changes in information delivery. The National Task Force and Local Communist Armed Conflict has invited the Integrated Bar of the Philippines' 25th Board of Governors to have a dialogue with former communist rebels. NTF-ELCAC spokesperson for Legal Affairs lawyer Flosmer Chris Gonzalez said they want the IBP to hear from former CPP, NPA, NTF cadres about the movement's atrocities and terrorist activities. Gonzalez allayed concerns of the IBP over the request of National Security Advisor Hermogenes Esperon Jr. to order the blocking of several websites affiliated with the CPP, NPA, NTF. He assured that Esperon's request to the National Telecommunications Commission has sufficient basis and supported by documents and evidence. The NTF-ELCAC called on the IBP to give a voice instead to the victims of atrocities committed by the CPP, NPA, NTF, as well as to former rebels and cadres who have much to tell about the crimes committed by the CTG. Northern Mindanao's biggest media organization has called on authorities to launch on a multi-agency investigation into the killing of a block-time radio broadcaster in Cagayan de Oro City. The Cagayan de Oro Press Club called on the Cagayan de Oro City Police and the National Bureau of Investigation to launch a joint investigation to identify and arrest the killers of Federico Deng Gimpesal. The 62-year-old broadcaster was shot dead yesterday at his residence in Sitio Macanhan, Barangay Carmen. Gimpesal became a block-time commentator after his stint in the City Hall under the term of the late Mayor Vicente Emano. Incoming Misamis Oriental 2nd District Representative Yevgeny Vicente Emano has offered a 500,000 peso reward for those who can give information that could lead to the arrest of the assailants. The commuting public has expressed no less than a genuine gratitude for the free rides in Metro Rail Transit or MRT3 under the Duterte administration's Transport Department. An MRT personnel found a personalized note thanking all the men and women behind the touching service. The note came from a happy commuter who took train rides for 11 Wednesdays since April. Another colorful message card was also found inside the train. The MRT3 has been offering free rides for 3 months now, and it's just been concluded today. Let's take another look at today's biggest stories.
Ako, si Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. ay taimtim na nanunumpa. Natutuparin ko na buong katapatan at sigasig ang aking mga tungkulin bilang Pangulo ng Pilipinas.
A new chapter in the country's history begins. Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. is sworn into office as the 17th Philippine President, embarking on an array of solutions to concerns and calling on Filipinos to stay united. What do Pinoys expect from the new administration? We'll listen to their thoughts on what they believe are pressing matters that needs immediate attention from the new government. Some local government units see both all-timers and newcomers as elected officials also take their oath of office. And paying more fares. The Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board approves the 2 pesos hike in minimum fare of jeepneys starting July 1st. As Filipinos, we all have a vital role to play in preventing the spread of COVID-19. So remember, wear face masks, wash your hands often, practice safe physical distancing, go out only for essential reasons, and get vaccinated as soon as possible to protect ourselves, our families, and the community. Together, we can beat COVID-19. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. For more news content, check our webpage or log on to the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. We are shown on the pages of the PZOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on PTV4. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know from the PNA Newsroom. We tell stories that inspire change. I'm Stephanie Savaliano. Good day.